People think the worst thing a man can experience in a relationship is rejection. They think the deepest wound is betrayal, the unanswered text, the slammed door, the final argument that ends with two people hurling accusations across a room already filled with emotional ash. But they are wrong. The most dangerous part isn't when a female empath leaves. It's when she stops needing to. The real pain was never her anger, never her tears, never her desperate attempts to explain what was breaking inside her while he stood there, too distracted by his own ego to hear it. The true horror begins with silence, not the kind of silence that begs for resolution, not the kind that trembles with hope. No, this is the silence that arrives when something ancient inside her finally clicks into place, like a lock turning deep inside a sealed vault, like the final hum of a machine shutting itself down forever. And in that moment, the woman who once poured oceans into empty hands feels nothing at all. No pleading, no panic, no need to be understood, just stillness. And for the man who built his power on her emotional availability, that silence feels like standing in front of a house he once entered freely, only to find the gates welded shut. Stay with me, because what happens next changes everything. Chase Hughes discovered something terrifying about human behavior. He understood that people rarely fear what harms them. They fear what they can no longer control. And according to Jungian psychology, this moment is called psychological compensation, the unconscious restoring balance after years of self-abandonment. Carl Jung believed that when one part of the self is suppressed for too long, the psyche revolts. It compensates. It summons the shadow. Hughes called this the return of buried sovereignty. And nowhere is this transformation more chilling than in the female empath, because for years she does what society praises her for. She absorbs. She forgives. She explains away cruelty. She becomes the emotional sponge for everyone around her. She takes confusion and translates it into understanding. She takes neglect and reshapes it into patience. She takes emotional starvation and convinces herself that love simply requires sacrifice. And slowly, almost invisibly, she disappears. She becomes a bridge built entirely for others to cross. And each time someone reaches the other side, they burn the bridge behind them. Still, she rebuilds, again, and again, and again, until one day there is nothing left but smoke. Most men cannot handle a female empath because they mistake her endurance for weakness. That is the first reason. Her softness deceives them. They see compassion and assume compliance. They see forgiveness and assume permission. They interpret her willingness to understand as evidence she will tolerate anything. But they fail to understand something Hughes warned repeatedly. The most dangerous person in any room is not the loudest. It is the quiet observer who sees everything and says nothing. The empath is always observing, always calibrating, always gathering psychological data through emotional resonance. She notices the shift in your tone before you hear it yourself. She feels the fracture in your sincerity before your lie fully forms. She sees the mask slipping long before it falls. And because she sees so clearly, she often overcompensates with empathy. She tells herself your cruelty must come from pain. Your manipulation must come from fear. Your inconsistency must come from confusion. So she keeps giving, pouring herself into a bottomless well, hoping eventually the well will overflow. It never does. And eventually the rope snaps. That snapping sound is the second reason men cannot handle her. Because when it breaks, it happens silently. Jung called this enantiodromia, the tendency for anything pushed to its extreme to transform into its opposite. The endlessly patient become unreachable. The endlessly forgiving become immovable. The endlessly available become absent. And when this shift happens inside the empath, there is no warning siren, no dramatic confrontation, no emotional explosion, just a quiet internal click, like a receiver disconnecting, like static dissolving into dead air. One moment she is trying to save the relationship. The next, she is gone while still standing in front of you. Her face is calm, her voice is steady, her eyes no longer search yours for reassurance. The signal has been extinguished, and that is what terrifies him. Because manipulators understand conflict. They know how to navigate tears. They know how to weaponize apologies. They know how to provoke emotional chaos because chaos gives them leverage. But stillness? Stillness is unreadable. Stillness is unhackable. Stillness is the psychological equivalent of a fortress wall rising overnight where an open field once stood. And suddenly every tool he used stops working. That is the third reason most men cannot handle her. Their control evaporates. The guilt no longer lands. The carefully rehearsed apologies sound hollow. The love bombing feels theatrical, predictable, almost embarrassing. It is like watching a magician perform the same trick after you've already seen the hidden compartment. The illusion shatters, and once shattered, it cannot be restored. He leans harder, texts longer, promises bigger. He reaches for every emotional hook that once pulled her back, but the hooks find no flesh, only air. And this confuses him, because he mistakes emotional detachment for emotional damage. He assumes she has become cold, broken, bitter. He tells himself she has changed, and he is right, but not in the way he believes. She has not become less, she has become whole. This is the fourth reason men cannot handle a female empath. They cannot comprehend shadow integration. Jung taught that healing does not happen through purity. It happens through wholeness, through meeting the parts of ourselves we were taught to fear. For the empath, the shadow often contains everything she was denied permission to become. Her anger, her refusal, her selfishness, her boundaries, her capacity to walk away without guilt. For years, she buried these traits beneath politeness and understanding. She believed love required endless accommodation. She believed goodness meant self-erasure. But the psyche cannot tolerate imbalance forever. Eventually, the shadow rises, not as destruction, as correction. And when it arrives, it feels sacred, like discovering a hidden room inside your own house, a room filled with armor you forgot was yours. She doesn't become cruel. She becomes clear. She doesn't become hard. She becomes defined. The part she feared becomes the part that saves her. And this transformation is unbearable for men who depended on her fragmentation, because the version of her they controlled was incomplete. She had holes they could reach through, needs they could manipulate, fears they could trigger. But now, the walls are solid stone. The gates are reinforced. The house is finally secure. This is the fifth reason. She no longer explains herself. This drives manipulators insane, because explanation is negotiation, and negotiation leaves openings. As long as she explains, he can interrupt, deflect, twist her meaning, turn her truth into a debate. But when she stops explaining, the conversation dies, and in that death, his influence dies with it. He asks why she changed. She shrugs. He accuses her of being distant. She nods. He tries to provoke emotion. Nothing. It is like screaming into a canyon and hearing no echo return. And for someone addicted to emotional leverage, silence is unbearable. Hughes understood this. He knew the greatest disruption to manipulation is non-reactivity, not resistance, not retaliation, absence, because absence offers nothing to push against. And without resistance, the manipulator collapses under the weight of his own momentum, like a bridge giving way beneath the feet of the one who assumed it would always hold. This is the sixth reason most men cannot handle her. Her stillness exposes their shadow. The empath's detachment becomes a mirror, and mirrors are merciless. When she stops absorbing his chaos, he is forced to face it himself. When she no longer carries his emotional debris, he must finally feel its weight. And most men are not prepared for this confrontation because they built identities around avoidance, projection, deflection, performance. They outsource self-awareness to the women who love them. And when that woman becomes psychologically unavailable, their reflection sharpens. They see what they are without her emotional labor softening the image. It is terrifying. Like lights flickering on inside an abandoned theater, revealing dust, decay, and years of neglect. For the first time, there is nowhere to hide. No one to blame. No empath to translate their dysfunction into innocence. Just truth, raw and fluorescent. And truth is unbearable for those who spent their lives rehearsing illusion. But for her, truth becomes freedom. This is the seventh and final reason. She no longer needs to be chosen. This is individuation, Jung's highest form of psychological development. The sovereignty of self. The moment the fragmented psyche returns home. For years, she sought validation through being needed. She believed worth was earned through sacrifice. She confused being tolerated with being loved, and so she waited. Waited to be appreciated. Waited to be understood. Waited for the man she loved to finally become who he promised he would be. But eventually the waiting ends. Not because he changed, because she did. And when that transformation completes itself, something majestic happens. Hope dissolves, not into despair, into peace. The leash severs, the signal dies, the gates lock, and on the other side of that silence stands a woman untouched by the noise that once ruled her. She no longer defends her decisions, no longer justifies her boundaries, no longer explains why she left. She simply becomes unreachable. And this is not revenge. It is transcendence, not hatred. Wisdom, not emotional death, psychological immunity. She has passed through the fire and discovered she was never the thing burning. She was the forge itself. This is what most men cannot handle. Not her departure, her indifference. Because anger can be negotiated, sadness can be manipulated, hope can be exploited. But indifference? Indifference is absolute. It is the final locked gate with no keyhole. And standing before it, he realizes the devastating truth. He was never losing her. She was finding herself. The silence you hear is not emptiness. It is the sound of a soul becoming whole. The stillness is not absence. It is power settling into its rightful place. And she is no longer waiting to be chosen. She has already chosen herself.